The wind howled like a living creature outside the dome. Alex tightened the straps on his gloves and checked the energy panels for the 100th time that night. The storm had been growing stronger all evening, throwing sheets of snow against the reinforced windows of the small colony. It was a frozen world on the edge of explored space, and even with the best technology, life here was a constant test of skill and patience. He walked along the narrow corridor, his boots crunching against the hardened frost that had built up over the tiles. The lights flickered slightly, struggling against the storm's interference. "Everything's holding," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. There wasn't anyone else. The colony had been mostly abandoned after the initial survey teams had left. Now he was alone, keeping the systems running. Alone, that is, until tonight. A sudden crash echoed from the living quarters. Alex spun around, heart hammering. The sound was like nothing he had ever heard before. It was loud, chaotic, and somehow fragile. He rushed down the hallway, sliding on the icy floor tiles, and skidded into his room. What he saw made him freeze. A figure lay on the floor, shivering violently. Her body was bare, and frost clung to her skin. At first, Alex thought she might be one of the survey team members who had been lost during the last storm. But her features were unlike anything he had seen. Her skin had a faint iridescent glow. Her eyes were larger than human eyes, and her hair shimmered like threads of silver in the dim light. She was alien, but clearly sentient and clearly in terrible danger. Alex's mind raced. The air inside the dome was only just warm enough for him, and this storm could kill anyone without proper shelter. She could not survive outside. Without thinking, he rushed to the storage cabinet, grabbed a thermal blanket, and wrapped it around her shaking form. Her teeth chattered, and she whispered sounds he didn't understand. Then she reached out a trembling hand toward him, her large eyes wide with desperation. "I need warmth," she managed, her voice faint but urgent. Alex froze. The words were simple, but their meaning was clear. She was not speaking metaphorically. Her species required human warmth to survive. He had read about symbiotic relationships between humans and some alien species in old reports, but he had never imagined encountering one himself, and certainly not like this. Here, alone, in the middle of a storm that could strip life from anyone in minutes. He moved quickly, setting up a portable heater and turning on every energy panel he could reach. The room gradually filled with warmth, and he handed her a spare set of insulated coveralls. "You need this," he said gently, though he did not know if she could understand him fully. She hesitated, then allowed him to slip the garment over her trembling form. Even covered, her body seemed fragile, as if the cold had seeped into her bones. Her eyes followed him everywhere, filled with a mixture of fear, confusion, and hope. Alex realized she must have been on this planet for a while, caught in the storm. "How did you survive out there?" he asked, though he did not expect an answer. She shivered and gestured weakly toward the window. He understood. The storm. She had been outside when it hit, and she had no way to shield herself. He nodded, more to himself than to her. It was going to be a long night. He decided to prepare some food and hot drinks. He heated water in a small container and poured it into a mug, careful not to spill on her. When he handed it to her, she took it with both hands, almost as if she feared it would disappear. She sipped carefully, and for a moment Alex allowed himself to breathe. She was stabilizing. The alien, whom he later learned to call Leora through broken gestures and repeated sounds, could not speak his language yet. But communication came slowly. Through gestures, drawings on the floor, and a few sounds that vaguely resembled words, she showed him her situation. Her people were being hunted across the galaxy, and she had fled from a patrol of a militaristic faction that saw her kind as a threat. She had landed on this planet accidentally, caught in the storm, and almost died before she found his dome. Alex listened carefully. Even without full understanding, the fear and desperation in her eyes were unmistakable. He realized that survival alone was not enough. He had to protect her until she could safely leave the planet. And perhaps in the process he could learn more about her remarkable species. The storm raged on outside, battering the dome with snow and wind. Alex checked the energy levels again. They were holding, but only just. The old generator was struggling against the temperature drop, and if it failed, they would both be in mortal danger. He decided to move Leora to the maintenance section of the colony, where he had more control over heat and life support systems. Supporting her carefully, he led her down the dimly lit corridors. Making sure to avoid sharp turns and icy patches, she leaned on him instinctively, her trust growing with each step. Alex felt a strange sense of responsibility. He had trained for emergencies, but never like this. Never had he imagined that he would be the protector of an alien being, relying on his warmth to survive. They reached the maintenance bay, a larger area filled with pipes, panels, and spare parts. He activated the backup heaters and adjusted the ventilation to circulate warm air efficiently. Leora's breathing slowed, her body relaxing slightly for the first time. Alex set up a temporary sleeping area for her, using blankets and insulation panels to create a cocoon of warmth. He watched as she curled up, her eyes closing briefly. Despite the situation, he could not ignore the quiet beauty of her features. The alien's presence was mesmerizing, not only because of her appearance but because of the life force she seemed to exude, a fragile, urgent vitality that relied on human care. Hours passed, and the storm outside showed no signs of stopping. Alex remained alert, monitoring the energy systems and keeping an eye on Leora. He used the time to experiment with small gestures of communication. He pointed to himself and said his name, then indicated her and encouraged her to say hers. She responded with a soft sound, Leora, though the pronunciation was halting. Alex repeated it, making sure she knew he understood. They shared a small smile, an unspoken acknowledgement of trust and understanding. In the vast frozen emptiness of the planet, two beings from entirely different worlds had found a fragile connection. Survival was no longer just about warmth and energy. It was about trust, empathy, and the bond forming between them. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the colony. Red lights flashed, and the sound of external scanners pinging indicated approaching ships. Alex's heart sank. The patrol. The ones Leora had been fleeing. They were closer than he had feared. He quickly checked the status of the energy shields and security systems. They were functional but not fully prepared for combat. Leora stirred, sensing the danger. She looked at him with wide, panicked eyes, and Alex understood instantly. They were in immediate danger, and hiding alone would not be enough. They had to act. He grabbed a toolkit, a portable energy disruptor, and some makeshift defensive devices he had constructed over weeks of solo maintenance. "Stay here," he said, though he was unsure if she understood the urgency of his tone. Leora placed a hand on his arm, a silent plea for him not to leave her. Alex felt a surge of determination. No, he would not leave her. Not now, not ever. Human courage and ingenuity had kept them alive so far, and it would see them through the coming danger. The first patrol drones appeared outside the dome, scanning the area. Alex quickly connected his devices to the colony's systems, causing interference that made it appear as if the colony was larger, more fortified, and occupied by more defenders than it actually was. Leora watched him, her alien senses apparently detecting the tension and purpose in his actions. Minutes stretched like hours as they waited for the patrol to approach closer. Then a shadow passed over the dome and the first scout landed with a hiss of magnetic stabilizers. Alex held his breath, ready to activate his traps. Leora's eyes were fixed on the scanners, her instincts guiding her understanding of the threat. Then the patrol moved on, apparently deceived by the false readings and interference. Alex exhaled slowly, relief washing over him, but he knew this was only the beginning. The enemy would return, and when they did, they would be more dangerous. Leora reached out, placing her hand over his. It was a simple gesture, but it spoke volumes. Gratitude, trust, and perhaps something deeper, a recognition of the human strength she depended on. Alex nodded silently, understanding that survival was no longer just about warmth or safety. It was about alliance, courage, and the unspoken bond forming between them. As the storm outside continued to rage, the two sat together in the maintenance bay, a fragile oasis of warmth, trust, and determination. Tomorrow they would face new dangers, but tonight they had survived. And in that survival they had discovered something more powerful than any technology: the resilience and courage of a human, and the life-affirming bond between two beings from entirely different worlds. The night stretched on, the storm outside refusing to ease even slightly. Alex kept watch in the maintenance bay, listening to the low hum of the backup generators and the occasional crackle of wind against the dome. Leora lay beside him, her breathing steady now, but her eyes never fully closed. She was alert, her alien senses clearly aware of every vibration, every shift in the air. Alex admired her resilience. Even in her weakened state, she had the quiet strength of a being used to surviving against impossible odds. He had spent hours reinforcing the dome's energy systems, making sure the heaters were functioning at maximum efficiency, and even rerouting power to the security barriers. Every move he made was precise, careful, but fast. The patrol could return at any moment, and when they did, there would be no second chances. Hours passed in tense silence, broken only by the sound of the storm and the occasional hum of machinery. Leora sat up suddenly, her eyes bright with alarm. She pointed to a section of the dome's outer wall, and Alex followed her gaze. A shadow moved across the snow, fast and deliberate. Scouts. They had come closer than before, and now they were checking the perimeter. Alex's mind raced. The colony had only basic defenses, and the storm made it impossible to call for help. He had to act with what he had. Quickly, he gathered his tools, some spare panels, and a small energy disruptor he had built for emergencies. He showed Leora what he intended to do, pointing to each device and mimicking the actions with his hands. She nodded, understanding him perfectly without a single word spoken. Together they moved through the narrow corridors, setting traps and creating diversions. Alex attached small magnetic pulses to the outer panels, designed to make the patrol's scanners see multiple duplicates of the colony's interior. He positioned reflectors to create false shadows in the snow, and even rigged small noise generators to mimic the sound of moving human figures. Leora helped by positioning reflective panels in the areas he could not reach, her quick hands and agility proving invaluable. When everything was ready, Alex and Leora retreated to the maintenance bay, hiding behind the insulated panels. Outside, the first of the patrol's larger ships hovered above the dome. Its scanners swept the area, glowing briefly before moving on. Alex's heart pounded. He held his breath, praying that their illusions would be enough. The ship's shadow fell across the dome again, and this time, a group of armored scouts disembarked. They moved cautiously, their movements precise and calculated. Alex could see them through the reinforced window, their weapons scanning for life signs. He gestured to Leora, signaling her to stay quiet. She flattened against the floor, her large eyes scanning the intruders, every muscle tense with readiness. The scouts stopped near the main entrance, and Alex activated the first set of noise generators. The sounds of footsteps echoed from the opposite side of the dome, drawing the scouts' attention. One of them moved to investigate, while the others remained near the entrance. Alex waited, timing everything carefully. He had no weapons to fight them directly, but he had something better: strategy and human ingenuity. Next, he triggered the magnetic pulses on the outer panels. The scanners on the patrol suits flickered, detecting multiple energy signatures inside the dome. The scouts looked at each other, confused. One raised a communicator to report, but the signal was scrambled by Alex's disruptor. Frustration was clear in their gestures, and for a moment Alex felt a surge of hope. Then one scout moved toward the maintenance tunnel. Alex's pulse quickened. He knew the tunnel was narrow, and the scout could be easily misled. He turned to Leora, pointing to a small hatch above the tunnel. She understood immediately. With a burst of speed, she climbed the panels and positioned herself where the scout could not see her. She dropped a small reflector at the right moment, casting a blinding glint into the scout's visor. The scout stumbled, temporarily blinded, giving Alex just enough time to activate another pulse, causing the scanner to overload. The scout shouted, and the others rushed to help, but it was too late. The illusions, the noise, and the strategic placement of reflective panels had confused them completely. They moved cautiously now, unsure of where the real threats were. Alex allowed himself a brief moment to breathe. Human ingenuity had turned the tide, at least for now. Leora climbed down from her position and joined Alex, her expression a mix of awe and gratitude. She pointed to herself and then to him, making a gesture of connection. Alex smiled faintly. He understood. They were a team now, relying on each other to survive. He had read about humans being capable of incredible teamwork and adaptability, but experiencing it in real time against an alien species was something else entirely. The patrol lingered for several more hours, but Alex's preparations held. Eventually, the larger ship lifted off, taking the scouts with it. The alarms stopped and silence returned to the storm-battered colony. Alex exhaled, exhaustion weighing heavily on him. He turned to Leora, who was watching him intently, her large eyes reflecting relief. "You're safe, for now," he said softly. Though she could not understand the words fully, she responded with a gentle hum, a sound that seemed to convey thanks and trust simultaneously. Alex realized that she relied on him not just for warmth but for survival itself. And in return, he felt a strange sense of purpose he had never known before. Protecting her was no longer just a duty, it was a calling. The storm finally began to ease as dawn approached. The sky outside the dome lightened slightly, casting a pale glow across the snow-covered landscape. Alex checked the energy panels again, ensuring everything was stable. Leora stood beside him, her body still fragile but gradually regaining strength. She reached out and touched the heater panel, her gesture showing curiosity and understanding of how humans could manipulate technology for survival. "I'll help you," Alex said, using gestures this time. He showed her how to reroute power, how to check the panels, and even how to use some of the emergency tools. She observed carefully, mimicking his movements with surprising precision. Despite the differences between their species, they were learning to work together, a bond forming stronger than any language barrier. As the day progressed, they explored the rest of the colony together. Alex showed her the storage rooms, the hydroponic gardens, and the backup generators. Leora marveled at human engineering, pointing at objects and making small sounds of admiration. Alex laughed quietly. It was rare to hear someone appreciate his work so genuinely. Their conversation, as limited as it was, grew through gestures, drawings, and simple sounds. Leora learned his name, and Alex repeated hers countless times, making sure he remembered it. Every small interaction deepened their connection. They were not just survivor and protector, they were companions bound by circumstance and trust. In the evening, Alex prepared a simple meal using the colony's hydroponic supplies. He shared it with Leora, showing her how to eat safely in this environment. She followed carefully, her movements elegant and precise. Even in such small moments, Alex saw the remarkable adaptability of humans and the quiet brilliance of Leora's species. Together, they created a small oasis of warmth and life in a world that was otherwise harsh and unforgiving. As night fell again, Alex and Leora returned to the maintenance bay. He had reinforced the panels and added extra insulation. They sat together, close enough that her body absorbed the warmth she needed, yet far enough to respect her boundaries. In the quiet, they shared a moment of understanding that transcended words. The storm had tested them, and they had survived. They had survived not through brute force, but through cleverness, courage, and the unspoken bond between two beings who had no reason to trust each other, yet did. Alex thought about the future. The patrol would return eventually. They would have to leave this planet to find a safer place for Leora. But he also realized something profound. Humans could face impossible odds and survive, not just through strength but through intellect, creativity, and empathy. He had just witnessed it firsthand. And perhaps, he thought with a faint smile, that was what made humans special. Leora rested her head on his shoulder, a gesture of trust and gratitude. Alex did not move. He allowed her to stay, feeling the warmth and the quiet life force that connected them. In a world of cold and danger, they had found something warmer than any heater, stronger than any barrier, human ingenuity and the courage to protect life, even when it was not his own. The night passed slowly but without incident. When morning arrived, the storm had finally broken. The sky was clear, and the sun's pale light glinted off the snow. Alex and Leora stood at the edge of the dome, looking out at the frozen landscape. It was beautiful, harsh, and full of challenges, but now they faced it together. Alex placed a hand on the wall of the dome, feeling the vibrations of life and energy. He knew the patrol would eventually return, but he also knew that together, he and Leora could survive anything. Human courage, cleverness, and adaptability had turned the tide once, and they would do it again if needed. Leora's eyes met his, and in that silent moment they understood each other completely. Survival was no longer just about heat or shelter. It was about partnership, trust, and the quiet heroism that made humans truly remarkable. They turned back into the colony, ready to face whatever the galaxy would throw at them next.